Afternoon Tea. Written by KDJ 225. Read by Rashi. Wriothesley has immense respect for Neuvillette, and most people know this without asking. He can admit it. He does have a tendency of bringing up the man's name whenever there's a chance to, as some people, i.e. the traveler, can attest to. With such self-esteem, of course, it's inevitable for him to not want to waste said man's time. He will come when Neuvillette calls, and he will always be there to provide aid, should there be any particularly unruly incoming inmates. He may take his time whenever it comes to basking in the sun, but with Neuvillette, he will always ensure that he never overstays his welcome. On the other hand, should Neuvillette wish to linger, he will always be happy to continue entertaining him. He's not quite sure what to do when Neuvillette invites him to a meeting with no business in mind. "You're giving me a teacup set?" he says carefully, slowly, eyeing the fancy and custom-made, it would seem, teacup set that Neuvillette had presented before him on his coffee table, its porcelain white, the lip of the cup, and its accompanying saucer, painted blue and gold, in imitation of Fontaine's sole symbol of justice. The dangling ornaments on Neuvillette's coat seemed to glow under the light filtering through the painted glass of his office windows, letting Wriothesley know exactly where such a design was inspired from. It's certainly something to receive such a symbolic thing as a gift. First it had been the boxes of tea and the codex. Now this? Do you mean to remind me that justice is ever present, even in the autonomous stronghold that is the fortress of Meripede? He teases, tracing a finger over the handles of the cup. He doesn't mention the sea otter hanging from the lip of the teacup. It's enough of a struggle, as is not to chuckle at such a cute decoration coming from the unimpeachable Chief Justice. First the legal codex, and now this teacup with the subtle design inspired by Fontaine's one and only Iudex. Neuvillette clears his throat. He says, "I am aware of your exemplary governance over the fortress, Your Grace. The legal codex was merely my way of participating in our shared joke with Clorand. I assure you, there were no hidden meanings behind it. And this?" Wriothesley turns the cup until its handle is facing his right side and gives Neuvillette an amused smile when the man's gaze flickers away for a moment. What a rare sight it is to see the man so unsure. He's always in his element during trials and office hours, but when it comes to behaving as a human, it couldn't be denied that he occasionally falters. It's charming in its own way, though he'd never tell Neuvillette that. He sits back and asks, "Did you make this too?" Draconic eyes look back at him. The sight, wrinkling at the corners of his eyes, lets Wriothesley know that he's pleased, as does the slight upward tug of the corners of his lips. "Indeed, I have. I have practiced much, but I am uncertain if my efforts are acceptable to someone who would be considered a tea connoisseur, and has more experience in using such wares." "It's near perfect. Trust me. This kind of thing would sell at a remarkably high price, should you ever wish to open a shop for teaware outside of your work as Chief Justice." Neuvillette shakes his head, sparing no second to consider such an endeavor. "Though it has been enjoyable to partake in such activities, I believe such crafts are best left as something to do in my spare time. And I would prefer to give such things only to those who are close to me." "Well, I'm honored to be considered one of those people." He acquiesces. He raises the cup to observe just a bit more, turning it this way and that to fully digest the unmistakable design born from the Chief Justice's uniform. "I do wonder about the design choice, however. Or is that something that's supposed to remain a mystery? Well, like the otter, for example," he cuts in, setting the cup back down. He pats the small otter's head gently with his index finger, before tracing that finger down the surprisingly intricate details of its back. Even the otter hadn't escaped the teacup set's theme. Its little head is adorned with what seems to be a simpler version of the clip in Neuvillette's hair, while the fur at the back is tied up at the ends with a dark blue ribbon, similar to what he wears. He asks, "Why not a dragon, like the one you gave the traveler?" "Would a dragon have been preferable? I had believed that something like this would be considered an appropriately small, yet aesthetically pleasing addition." "What? Did Sigewinne tell you that?" "You are correct." Wriothesley huffs out a laugh. "All right, fine. It's cute, but how is he supposed to bring up the fact that it seems to be designed after Neuvillette himself? It would have been strange enough if Neuvillette had designed something with Wriothesley's preferred color scheme of red and black in mind, but to design something after himself, then gifting said something to Wriothesley. Maybe he's overthinking it. Maybe it's just the color scheme that Neuvillette is comfortable working with, though that does nothing to explain how oddly familiar the otter looks. "Well, what can I say?" he settles on saying. "I appreciate the gift, monsieur. It's quite thoughtful of you to take my love of tea in mind while making such a gift." He pauses, thinking over his next words, as he avoids the watchful gaze on him. He could ask why there's a gift in the first place. He could ask why it's being given to him in particular. He could ask if there were any others who were given something similar. He could even ask if there's a reason for the specific design of the teacup set. Yet, what comes out of his mouth is, "I'll have to decline the gift, however. Maybe Sigewinne could better appreciate such a gift than me, even if she doesn't hold the same love for tea as I do." The patient, near-expectant look on Neuvillette's face falters to make way for disappointment. It sends a pang through Wriothesley to know that he'd caused it. It's never easy, disappointing someone who holds you in such high esteem. Neuvillette asks him, "Is there something wrong with the present? If I've done anything to offend, please tell me so that I may correct myself." "Oh, not at all, monsieur." He disagrees, shaking his head. "It might even be the loveliest gift any person could receive. It's just that, well, it's burdensome to receive such a gift personally from our Iudex. Pardon the metaphor, but tongues would wag should anyone find out I've accepted such a thing from you. You did mention it may be considered bribery that first time I gave you the boxes of tea." Neuvillette agrees. "But surely this wouldn't be as much of a concern. It was not bought, nor is it expensive. It is merely handcrafted by myself." "I suppose I'll have to be even more blunt." Wriothesley huffs, beginning to pack away the saucer, cup, and infuser into the box it had come with. It's beautiful, and it makes him happy that such a lovingly crafted gift could be so freely given to him by someone he trusts so immensely. But he couldn't deny the possible consequences for accepting such a gift. He might understand the unquestionable impartiality of the Iudex, but what of others with malicious intent? It's bad enough that people doubted Neuvillette at one point in time because of his choice to bring the Melusines with him. He doesn't want to be another source of conflict for the man. He explains, "People will gossip that we have an intimate relationship. Should they find out it's a handcrafted gift from the Iudex himself to the Fortress of Meripede's administrator. It certainly doesn't help that its design is reminiscent of you." "Do you see the problem now, monsieur?" Wriothesley asks, an amused lilt to his tone, as he watches the growing bemusement in Neuvillette's face. "It's one thing to imply buying off favors. It's another matter entirely to imply that I'm someone of significant, intimate value to you. I may have a riot on my hands should word get out that you have me in your pocket to that degree. Plus, it would have been easy to explain away if you had intended to commercialize your hobby, but as things stand, this is the only teacup set of its kind in existence." "I see. I apologize. I hadn't considered such consequences when I crafted my gift for you, Neuvillette said, sounding far too apologetic for such a small thing. Then, may I ask what kind of gift would be appropriate and acceptable for you? He laughs. You still want to give me something? You don't need to, monsieur. I already owe you too much as is. I do not give you gifts seeking recompense, Neuvillette said, frowning. I merely spend time crafting something as a form of mediation, and happen to consider it acceptable enough for gifting. Monsieur, surely you jest. He laughs in disbelief. With a gentle hand resting over the box holding the teacup set, he says, This doesn't seem to be something you can make without putting any thought into it. Neuvillette does not immediately answer. Wriothesley remains quiet with him, watching his beautiful, otherworldly face contort with a frown, unbefitting of his usual elegance. It makes him human, makes him seem like someone that Wriothesley could touch, which makes it all the more dangerous. Perhaps it's time to take his leave, if his thoughts are anything to go by. He sighs, shakes his head. Apologetically he says, Pardon, I may have overstepped. The gift is undeniably lovely, monsieur. Don't get me wrong. I just believe it'd be best to leave it to someone who can more freely appreciate it. No, it is my mistake to have designed it so extravagantly, Neuvillette says. He looks downtrodden at such a small thing. It makes Wriothesley wonder how anyone could find Neuvillette intimidating outside of the courtroom. I will admit that such a design was crafted on purpose, without consideration for such negative consequences. Please, forgive me. Wriothesley takes in the contrite look on his face. He takes in the slight bow of Neuvillette's head and his clasped hands. He takes in the show of seeming submission and thinks how this is their hydro dragon sovereign, bowing his head to a human for such a seemingly meaningless, trite manner. Yes, there were consequences to showing off that you had the Chief Justice's favor, but it would sure be meaningless in the long lifespan that is a dragon's life. Only Wriothesley would bear the full brunt of such a burden, if it ever came to pass. He swallows this knowledge with a dry throat, and huffs out a laugh. You designed it this way for what reason, monsieur? Don't tell me you wish to stake a claim. Neuvillette does not laugh. He does not stutter out excuses, nor does he scold Wriothesley for his irrelevant teasing. Wriothesley could have taken either of those reactions, could have played it off like he always did whenever he's teasing Neuvillette or joking with him. But Neuvillette looks back at Wriothesley with bright, amethyst eyes and says, You are quite keen as always, Your Grace. Wriothesley, well, he laughs. He laughs more loudly than he ever has before, so caught off guard as he is with Neuvillette's pure honesty. The man has always been honest, yes, but to admit to such selfishness, such blatant possessiveness, he jokes, I have always been yours, yet it seems that isn't enough. How possessive of you, monsieur. For the first time, in a long time, Neuvillette gawps at him. Such an unbecoming expression on the Chief Justice's face. Yet Wriothesley can only grin in amusement, instead of pointing out that he had elicited such an expression with his irreverence that even Neuvillette himself could be so undone by someone so simply human, and a sinner to boot. He can't even begin to process the idea that Neuvillette wishes to stake a claim on him. It's too much. Too soon. Neuvillette says, I have no excuses for my unbecoming behavior. Please, tell me what I can do to be forgiven for such a slight. Then tell me, why me? Neuvillette does not allow the question to hang in the air for longer than a second, when he responds, Why not you, Wriothesley? As if it were a fact, as if there were no better options than a sinner like him. He goes on, You are better than most men, if not the best, with your gregariousness and righteous heart. You took over the fortress not to seek power over men, but to provide a home for those exiled, to give them a second chance at life. You are gentle with the weak, and stern with those who abuse their power. The Melazines, who are like daughters to me, adore you, and believe you to be more trustworthy than most. In fact, they consider you adorable, just as I do. How could I have not chosen you?" Wriothesley opens his mouth, and finds himself unable to form words. No witty remark, no teasing, no denials escape him. How can he speak so glibly, as he often has, when faced with such a vulnerable, unabashed truth? It's one thing to be wanted, to be found attractive, to have people who desire the power you wield, but to have someone who knows all of your sins, who has raised you from prisoner to duke in one fell swoop, who knows you are one human among a million others, yet believes you to be worthy of love regardless. What can Wriothesley say to that? You really know how to leave a man speechless," Wriothesley mutters, hand coming up to cover his face as he heaves out a shaky breath. His face feels hot, and his eyes even hotter. He'd come up here, thinking that Neuvillette required his assistance. How could he have ever prepared himself for a deluge of revelations beyond his wildest imaginations? There's the sound of rustling clothes, of footsteps. He's barely lowered his hand from his face when another hand replaces it, and he finds himself facing the kneeling form of Fontaine's Chief Justice. Neuvillette looks up at him, as if it were completely normal for him to lower himself like this for anyone that isn't a Melazine. "I have overwhelmed you," he mutters, that draconic gaze of his roving over Wriothesley's face, as if it were worth all the interest in the world. "I will not apologize for my words, but your apologies will become meaningless if you keep repeating them," he teases. Neuvillette promptly shuts his mouth to the sound of Wriothesley's soft laughter. "I still can't accept your gift. You understand?" he says, tone wry, even with his racing thoughts. Neuvillette lowers his hand from his cheek at his words, slowly, carefully, as if waiting for the slight chance that Wriothesley will take his hand back. He chuckles, adding, "I would love to indulge you in private, but I don't want to compromise either of our positions, monsieur." Those sharp eyes soften their gaze at him. All at once, he understands the meaning of seeing love in someone's eyes. There is no denying the warmth he can feel, nor the gentle patience exuded by that draconic gaze. Love should be warm, he'd said, and he'd always believed it couldn't be for him in this lifetime, because he didn't feel like actively finding such love, because he doubted love could find him whenever he gave himself the opportunity. Yet here Neuvillette was, proving him wrong. "May I have your hand?" Neuvillette asks. "Permanently?" he jokes, reaching out to place his hand in Neuvillette's open palm. "If you would have me, then I would accept your hand in permanence." Neuvillette mutters, so quickly that anyone else might have missed the implication of such words. But he is a man who grew up in prison, ever wary and alert. It doesn't help when Neuvillette, that surprisingly sly man, chooses that moment to kiss the ring finger of the hand he'd given to him. "You're far craftier than I'd expect you to be, monsieur. But I think I'd like a date first." Neuvillette smiles at him. Wriothesley is not that much of a fool to believe he can make decisions for Neuvillette, that he can stop the man from wanting him, loving him, that desiring him is a bad idea. It would certainly be easy to say, and there were a variety of words he could use to break the man's heart in one go and ensure he'd never consider Wriothesley again. A dragon, Neuvillette may be. He is a flesh-and-blood man now, even with all his powers. At the end of the day, he is also someone who could be so vulnerable like this, and so adorably clumsy in his affections. And yes, Maybe Wriothesley doesn't feel like he deserves Neuvillette's love. But whoever does? When love shouldn't be deserved as it is just given without question and felt without reserve. Neuvillette tells him, "Would you allow me another chance to provide a subtler gift? Then, what about the teacup set? Are you going to keep it for yourself? I do not see myself using it, as it was crafted with you in mind. So, it shall be put in storage. I've said you're crafty, but it seems you're not crafty enough," he teases, leaning in to press a kiss to the hand clasping his own in a soft grip. "Keep it in your office. Just for me. We can still drink tea together, can't we? I did tell you I can indulge you in private." The relief is palpable in Neuvillette's smile, in his voice, in his eyes. "Truly?" Wriothesley smiled, amused, to think that all it took to receive such a fond, warm look of love from someone like this was to give them permission for it. "Truly, Neuvillette." He might doubt himself and Neuvillette's words once he is alone once more in the cold embrace of the fortress of Meadowpeed. He may reconsider, remembering the consequences of love beyond its honeyed promises. For now, however, he can allow himself this sweet warmth pooling in his chest, his stomach, just like their shared afternoon teas. Omake. By the way, there's one thing I'd like to comment on about the teacup set. Neuvillette perks up. Would you like me to customize it further? Or perhaps there is another style of teacup you would like me to craft? No, nothing like that, monsieur. It's just that the infuser you got with it isn't really conducive to a good cup of tea. I'll just bring something from my collection. How about that? That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Do dragons actually hoard things they consider precious? And is this one of those things? Ugh.